Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Sony Open Data Dive Show. We have a lot to cover this evening. We're going to take an extended look, a deep dive into Waialae, figure out the metrics and shot types and all of that play well here. We're going to take a deep dive into the field this week. We're going to take a look at everything, any and everything Waialae Country Club in the field this week for the Sony Open. I'm just excited for it. I've went ahead and made a couple of wagers myself for the week, and I need to expand on the shout out from last night from Phil, who earlier in the week let me know that he had done well on the Thursday showdown slate for the Century. He then updated me or let me know in last night's comments or last night's show's comments that he won close to $1,000 over the week. So a huge congratulations to you, Phil, for an amazing week at the Century. It's a great way to start your 2025, and we're going to try to keep that momentum moving forward. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where earlier today I posted some research around previous champions of the Sony, some patterns that they all share, which we'll cover a little bit later this evening, and the players in the field this week who also fit those patterns. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contests I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So that'll be out in a couple of days for the Sony. If you want to see those pieces of information, give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very, very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. And if you haven't noticed, over on social media, him and I have introduced our 2025 Picks Challenge, if you will. He updated that earlier today. I have taken a slight narrow lead, 4-3 over Gabe. But more so than that, jump into the comments, jump in over on that thread over on social media, jump in here and chat. Let us know your picks every week and join us as we continue that fun little exercise throughout 2025. So I'm going to enjoy my 4-3 lead while it lasts, because I'm sure it won't very long. But pretty decent Century. Not anything compared to Phil's, obviously, but decent Century, and we're gonna try to keep it rolling. You really are missing out if you aren't subscribed to Gabe's article. A lot of great information over there, and I do believe his chat will be back this evening or this Wednesday this week, and that happens after the DFS Tactics show as well. So make sure you're tuned in for that. And then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. Have you made any wagers for the Sony yet? Who do you think, or who you keyed in on early on in your research this week? What type of players do you think normally play well here? How much do you know of the course? All of that. Would love to hear from you all. So feel free to put your opinions and make your opinions heard in chat or in the comments. So let's get into it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2025 Sony Open. And we start, as we always do, on a Monday evening over at the extended forecast over at Windfinder. And not a lot like last week, honestly, in that the wind starts off, Thursday into the mid-teens, maybe gusts nearing 20. Does look like Friday will back off a little bit. But then come Saturday afternoon and especially Sunday, it does look like we're going to get quite a bit of gusty winds or sustained winds too. So it looks like wind is going to be a decent factor this week in Oahu. As it was Thursday at Kapalua, the wind did pick up a little bit Sunday as well, but Friday and Saturday it was just pristine at Kapalua, so that's why the scoring conditions were just astronomical. I don't think this is going to force YLI to play difficult by any means, but it might not be as easy as we originally thought, having seen this forecast now. So there's a look at the extended forecast, and of course we'll stay on top of this throughout the week, and we'll update this at the beginning of Wednesday night's show. But due to this forecast, we are actually going to take a look at some wind metrics tonight. And I do have two players, or I know of two players that have decided not to play this week in at YLI for the Sony in Oahu. Christian Bezadenhout and Davis Riley. Those two have decided not to play. They had originally committed, have withdrawn. So make sure your considerations do not include those two players this week. But again, coming off of that forecast, we are going to look at 2024, and I'm hoping that the wind metrics are in there. I don't know for certain that they are. We want moderate and windy. Looks like a little bit. So very small sample size here. For example, let's see, 20 is being the most from Tom Hoagie. Yep. So in moderate and windy conditions in 2024, your top performers in the field this week for the Sony: Denny McCarthy, Sahith Theegala, Charlie Hoffman, Justin Lauer, Chan Kim, Russell Henley, Billy Horschel, Brendan Todd, Ben Martin, and Andrew Novak. Those are your top 10 in terms of win performance in the past year. Now, normally I like to go to 2 years, but I'm just going to keep everything consistent for the first part of the 2025 year and just use 2024 stats. I think that's the best way to go about this. And with that forecast, other than maybe Sunday, when sustained winds appear to be in the 20s, I still think this is going to play pretty easy. YLI generally gets winners close to 20 under. They've been as high as mid-20s if the wind is really, really calm. Doesn't appear that's going to be the case. But even with some moderate wind in the past, we've gotten winners, up near 20, maybe even eclipsing 20 every once in a while, even in moderate winds. So when rounds have been easy relative to par in the 2024, and actually I'll include the Century as well because the Century is in the field or in the database now. Your top performers in the field this week for the Sony since the beginning of last year, when rounds are easy: Davis Thompson, Harry Hall, Ryo Hitsatsune, Luke Clayton, Ben Griffin, Chan Kim, Taylor Pendrith, Doug Gim, Lucas Glover, and Mav McNeely. All right. Before we go any further, let's go to the comparison course file. Let's go to Microsoft Excel for a quick moment here. And like we did last week for the Century, let's take a deep dive into YLI. Figure out where the players, the top 30, year in and year out, where their strokes gained are being accumulated, what metrics matter the most around the course. As we can see here, off the tee mattered very, very little last year, but that's a really, really low outlier. So if you remove that, it actually becomes pretty close to to tour average, about minus 1.5% against other full field courses on the PGA Tour. Now, again, you have to remove that low outlier, so it actually drops a little bit. But the biggest shot type, as you can see here, even with another low outlier in a different year, is putting. Putting is just an integral factor around Waialae. 20%, 19% more important than the average full field course for players that finish in the top 30. Just a big factor. The approach has fallen off in the past couple of years. Around the green has risen. So I don't know if that means that players are, trying to drive it further on these shorter par fours. What I think is actually happening, it coincides with a little bit of what we talked about last night. And I'll change the page view again just very quickly. They've lengthened the rough here over the past couple years. Long all last year, all long in 2022. Before that, you see it was shorter average. So with them lengthening the rough, it does appear that is leading to more missed greens, which in turn is leading to around the green being a little bit more of a factor. That is at least the story that's what I perceive from what the statistics are telling us. I still don't know if that's enough to really warrant looking at around the green in the mixed condition model, but I suppose we could probably look at it a little bit tonight. But I'm just not convinced that that it's going to be in the mixed condition model. Approach we're not going to ignore at all, and then we might take a slight look at off the tee, but I don't know. I feel like it's the same as around the green. As you can see, I mean, even the off the tee is outweighing the around the green a little bit, even with this high outlier, or excuse me, low outlier. So yeah, we should probably take a look at off the tee. We can take a look at off the tee when it's short. We can take a look at off the tee when it's easy. I'm thinking probably more short course off the tee metrics. Moving to distance and fairways and greens. This number is actually a little bit higher than you might think. Distance is still less important than the average full field course, but not by as much as you might think. Fairway is not a big deal because a lot of professionals aren't worried about being in the rough here, at least historically. Maybe they ought to be. Greens in regulation, not a big deal either, which is a little surprising. I would have thought good drives gained would have been it, but it was pretty low last year. So we've got some conflicting data in the driving and greens that we'll have to decipher. I still like the idea of good drives gained, especially since, as I mentioned, with them growing out the rough, if the player's not in the fairway, I'll probably want to see and make sure that they're good enough with their irons to hit the greens from the rough. Not as clear cut as I would have thought. Moving to scoring, no surprise here. It's birdies gained. There are a few eagles, especially on the very short par 5. Bogey avoidance is generally the more consistent metric, and then the birdies gained is where the spikeability comes. So, we're going to be looking at birdies or better, would be my guess. Although against the average full field course, it's actually the bogey avoidance. So interesting. Still leaning towards here. You got a couple of lower outliers, a couple of higher ones. I don't know. Moving into par 3s, 4s, and 5s. We saw last night that the par 3s just don't make up a whole lot here, which is surprising considering there's only 2 par 5s. But you see, it's a 0.9. It's really not all that much. And against the average full field course, I mean, it's very minuscule in terms of importance. Instead, you can see the par 4s are almost a 5. At a 4.93, about 20% more important, 15%. So big importance in the par 4s and playing them well this week. Hey, good evening, Darnell. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hope your Sony went well. I know you had that placement on Sepp Straka that didn't quite come through. I hope you had a decky. If you did, fantastic. If not, you just as similar as me. I was nowhere near Hideki. But otherwise, hopefully you had a good century. And we're going to try to keep the momentum for the Sony, as one of the viewers from last week had a fantastic week. So we're going to try and keep that momentum moving to Sony. It's good to see you this evening. Par 3s, not much. Par 4s. And as we talked about, all but 2 of the par 4s fall in these ranges, and that's where you see the majority of the strokes gained come. The 450 to 5 have been pretty consistent with the exception of this one lone high outlier. Had 10 on Morgan so close. One DFS lineups to Sam Burns saved me. That's one that I got wrong. He had never played the Century well, and he played it well this year. So kudos to you for being high on Sam Burns, because I definitely wasn't. But glad to hear you had a winning proposition for the Century. Mine wasn't a winning proposition, but I'm not disappointed with my results. I just didn't happen to have things go my way, even though I had a lot of Morikawa. Hey, good evening, Joanne. Thanks for jumping in chat. Happy New Year to you as well. Glad golf is back. Let's win some money. As I was mentioning to Darnell just a moment ago, there was a viewer last week who, again, just taking him at his word, he won close to $1,000 on a lot of the on the back of a lot of the suggestions from last week, mainly Sepp Straka, who I was, again, very, very high on. So we're going to try to keep that momentum, even though I didn't have a Hideki outright. DFS, I got a little bit, I can't say unlucky. I just didn't have the right combination of people. I'd have Morikawa and then like Eric Cole, who didn't play well. So just didn't have the right combination of players. I had the right players, just not in the combination. But good to see you this evening, and hopefully you are ready for 2025 and all that it is going to bring. And then lastly, we talked about the par 4s, par 5s. There's only 2 of them, but they do play fairly significant in terms of top 30 performance. And really, it's all in the 500 to 550, which makes a lot of sense. You've got one par 5 at 506, the other is at 551. So very easily, both of them can fall into this range on any given day. Taking a look at proximity, I know these numbers won't look like a lot, but as we saw last night, this 175 to 200 is actually pretty big. It's a pretty big number. The total prox is a big number, 18%, but look at this 175 to 200. Just really, all 3 of these ranges are really, really high compared to other full field courses. Now, the 125 to 150 has lowered year over year, so not sure if we want to put a lot of focus into that, because the majority of approach shots here at YLI come from these 2 proximity lengths. And other than 2021, 175 to 200 has actually been the more statistically significant range. So interesting to see that. Sorry, I've got these zeroed out because the Amex didn't come in last year. Yeah, quite interesting. So perhaps we're looking at 175 to 200 in terms of proximity. But there's a look at a deeper dive into YLI, the metrics that seem to play most important year over year, and a little bit of some comparison against other full field courses. On the PGA Tour, I know we didn't do that last week for the Sony because it's not, or for the Century because it's not a full field event, but able to do that for the Sony. So now we'll come back to Fantasy National, and let's take a look at a few of these strokes gained opportunities and metrics here. Definitely going to look at. We're probably going to look at all four of these. There appeared to be an argument to be made to look at all of them in one form or fashion. So as we get Fantasy National prepped here, we'll look at off the tee. I'm still leaning towards short courses for this filter. With the wind forecast, very well could be average difficulty this week in Oahu. And I think that Waialae is going to play very similarly to a lot of other courses, shorter courses on the PGA Tour, akin to say maybe like a Harbor Town. I'm thinking PGA National, although PGA National is really hard. It's still the kind of the same deal where you are pretty punished for not finding the fairway. And at least it appears that players are starting to get punished more and more for missing the fairway here at the Sony the past few years. So your top off the tee players, oh gosh dang it, I didn't want 2023, I wanted 2024 and 2025. Do I not have 2025 option? I guess not. Okay, your top off the tee players from 2024 when courses were short: Austin Eckroat, Alex Smalley, Keith Mitchell, Patton Kizzire, Sepp Straka, Davis Thompson, Joel Damon, Zach Johnson, Hayden Buckley, and Harris English. We will remove those filters and then get set for approach. Your top approach players since the beginning of last year in the field this week at the Sony: Corey Connors, Lucas Glover, Tom Hoagie, Doug Gim, Keith Mitchell, Kurt Kitayama, JJ Spawn, Siwoo Kim, Andrew Novak, and Joel Damon. Not sure if or what filter I would want for around the green. So your top around the green players in the field this week: Hideki, Mackenzie Hughes, Webb Simpson, Harry Hall, Davis Thompson, Matt McNeely, Denny McCarthy, C.T. Payne, Badley, and Brendan Todd. And then lastly, we'll take a couple of different looks at putting since it's been so very important, but I do want to take a look at these green speeds. So last year they were average, fast. Looks like they've sped them up the past couple of years. With that wind, they might have to keep it down a little bit. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at Bermuda greens. We'll take a look at fast and average speed Bermuda greens. So your top putters last year on average and fast Bermuda greens: Chad Ramey, Harris English, David Skins, Brian Harmon, Henley, Cam Davis, Billy Horschel, Taylor Montgomery, Nick Taylor, Brendan Todd. Those are your top 10 in terms of performance on specifically average and fast speed Bermuda greens. However, what I want to do is take a stronger look into the spike putting. Boy, Fantasy National's having a time here. Let's take a look at some spike putting. So I talked about it a little bit last week. This spike putting is the percentage of rounds a player accumulates, whatever you set. It could be 1, could be 2. We're going to go to 3. That is the number that I have seen most often when people are talking about spike putting. So on Bermuda greens last year, remove this fast filter. on Bermuda greens last year and then the Century, your top players, or the players that gained 3 or more strokes around. That's weird. Why is the... You see how it's not sorted? Look at 20% here and then it goes up. So this is kind of weird. But James Hahn, Norman Xiong, Aaron Badley, Brendan Todd, Michael Thorbjornsen, Matt McCarty, very good putter. So someone to probably keep an eye out this week, as this can turn into a putting contest, and he's a very good putter coming off the Korn Ferry Tour. Matt Kuchar, David Skins, Ryan Palmer, Hitsatsune. Those are all your players that gained 3 or more in 10% or more of their rounds. So quite a performance, a spike there. If we take a look at, say, why don't we decrease that by half? We'll go 1.5. Your top putters who had gained 1.5 or more. Tim Whiting, it's only 4 rounds. Taylor Montgomery. Thorbjornsen's very high up there in the 1.5. Mackenzie Hughes. David Skins. Chad Ramey. Stephen Fisk, only 3 rounds. Ryo Hitsatsune. Thomas Dietrich, who we were very high on last week. So more of that same putting. Looks like it should fit Thomas Dietrich at the Sony. At least putting. Maybe not other things, but Henley, who's played very, very well here in the past. Silverman, Vince Whaley, Brendan Todd, Hideki, putting Bermuda exceptionally well lately. So, or at least has spiked on it, which is what he did this past week at the Century. I spent some time last week talking about how he had never putt those greens very well, yet he comes to Kapalua last week and gains 10.5. Some things you just can't plan for. Although he's been putting Bermuda pretty well most recently. Like the FedEx St. Jude, he wins, gains 8, but he lost 3 at the Tour Championship. Those are Bermuda. So interesting, because it's generally been his worst surface as well. Sometimes guys just have good weeks. But there's a look at your top spike putters on Bermuda from last year. We will remove that. We'll go into fairways and greens. And again, I'm just going to be leaning into this good drives gain. That's where I'm at conceptually with this. And I'm going to use that short course filter. So your top good drives gained players in 2024 when courses were short. Eckroat again, Grayson Siggs, Siwoo Kim, Ben Coles, Tom Kim, Keegan, Chris Kurt, Rico Hoey, Andrew Novak, Kuchar, Ryder, and Straka. You probably do greens maybe. I don't think distance is going to be that big of a deal this week. So now we'll go into scoring, and this one's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to be looking at birdies or better. Will you go ahead and use the easy relative to par filter? It might be average this week with the amount of wind, especially on Sunday, but generally speaking, Waialae is pretty easy course, even with some wind. So your top birdies or better gained players in 2024 and last week's Century. When rounds were easy, Harry Hall, Luke Clanton, Taylor Pendrith, Chan Kim, Eric Cole, Sahith Theegala, Davis Thompson, Ryo Hitsatsune, Justin Lauer, and Joe Highsmith. You could look at opportunities as well. considering that the proximity seemed like it played a decent factor. Top opportunities gained: Lucas Glover, Joel Damon, McNeely, Harry Hall, Luke Clanton, Kitayama, Carson Young, Gim, Hoagie, Spawn, Hardy. Let's go to proximity, because all of those ranges look like they played a decent factor. So we'll just take a look at a big picture view here, 2024, 2025. No filter, just your top total prox players in the field this week: Kitayama, Glover, Damon, Hoagie, Mitchell, Chandler Phillips, Hideki, Doug Gim, Grayson Sigan, Novak, and Carson Young. Based on the statistics that we saw in Microsoft Excel, we're going to look at 175 to 200. Your top 175 to 200 prox players: Austin Eckroat, Norlander, Kitayama, Matty Schmid, Adam Svensson, Hideki, Joel Damon, Adam Hadwin, Doug Gim, and Nate Lashley. We're going to skip par 3s. We're going to look at par 4s, mainly the 400 to 500 range. So your top 400 to 450, Lauer, Hitsatsune, Sig, Blair, Henley, Davis Thompson, so on down. Really put a star next to Russell Henley. He plays both the 400 to 450 and 450 to 5 very, very well. Honorable mention to Taylor Pendrith, Luke Clanton, Lucas Glover, Hideki, 24th and 2nd. And then your top 450 to 5 players: Alejandro Tosti, Hideki, Russell Henley, Matt McNeely, Glover, Highsmith, and so on down. And then lastly, we'll take a look at par 5. We're going to look at 500 to 550 only, since both of them basically fall into this range. Doug Gim, Ben Griffin, Siwoo Kim, Tom Hoagie, Carson Young, Lipsky, Power, Schmid, Pendrith, and Garnett. All right. With that, I'll bring us back to the strokes gained in case there are some more questions. But we're going to move to Microsoft Excel now for good. We're going to take a look at the early look file, and then I'll show you some of what led to what I posted on social media for research earlier today. So let's start with sorting on some of these metrics that we know are going to be key factors this week, and how the players in the field have done at those metrics in the past 5 years at Waialae. So we're going to start with approach. Your top approach players the past 5 years at Waialae: Eric Van Rooyen. You see there, two for 3, leaves kind of a little bit to be desired in terms of finishes, but he's hit his irons very well. He just hadn't putt well here. Same can be said for Sepp Straka. Has hit his irons very, very well here, but it's not putt well. Hideki, much the same as Vincent. In fact, look at all these iron players. They have not they've not putt well here, but they have some degrees of success just because they've hit their iron so very well here. Out of curiosity, I'm going to skip ahead or jump ahead a little bit. I want to say what they've been doing with their proximities. And in fact, look at the total proxes. All of these players are really good with their total prox. In fact, the 175 to 200, all except for Siwoo, have been pretty darn good there. And to be fair to these guys, almost all of them have been good at all 3 of these ranges. So maybe total prox is a way to go in thinking about it this week. Considering Hideki's a former winner here. Siwoo's been very good here. Connors has been very good here. Nick Taylor has been very good here. Interesting. Quite interesting. We'll sort on putting. your top putters at Waialae the past 5 years, who's also in the field this week. Been on 2 for 2, average finish inside the top 10 is pretty solid. Harry Hall, Baddeley, this putt extremely well here. Rio Itatsune only once. Denny McCarthy has putt very well here. That's no surprise, but 3 for 3, average finish at 35th. You know, he cleans up his ball striking a little bit. He'd be dangerous. You can say that about him in any tournament almost, seemingly. There's Taylor Montgomery, very, very good putter. Chad Ramey has putt very well here, but not done anything else all that well. So you see he's only 1 for 3. Some more top putters. Rogers, Echeverria, Brendan Todd, 5 for 5. Putnam, 4 for 5 down here towards the bottom of your screen. Nick Taylor again. Russell Henley. So we're going to skip. Really, let's just go ahead and go to all the way to the par 4s. And 400 to 450. Again, been on, who's played them very, very well. Chad Ramey. We talked about how he had not a whole lot of success. He has played these shorter par 4s extremely well. But you can see his culprit. He has not played these par 5s well at all. Toasty, it's only one time. Chris Kirk, performing very well at these 400 to 450 par 4s. English, Baddeley, Henley, Hoffman, Montgomery. Surprised to see Cam Davis 5 for 5. This doesn't feel like a good Cam Davis course. But then again, he's won twice at the Rocket Mortgage, and that course is pretty short. Maybe there's something to that. Take a look at par 5s. Who's done well in the par 5s here at Waialae? Interesting, you see like 0.6. Oh shoot, I got the wrong column. My apologies. I wanted the 500 to 550. There we go. Yeah, 3.4 from Berger. Hoey and Schmid leaving a lot to be desired. They're like 0 for 2, so I'm guessing their par 4s are pretty bad. Yeah, kind of. But they've been doing the par 5s. Silverman, there's Siwoo, Buckley, Davis, Pat Gazire 4 for 5 here. Chris Kirk 4 for 5. Cage Lee 4 for 5. Last one I'm going to do is procs. I do want to look at some of these proximities. So procs total. Your top proximity players. Past 5 years at Waialae. Chris Kirk, Hideki, Echeverria, EVR, Svensson, Glover and Kitayama, leaving a lot to be desired in terms of finish, but good in total procs. Glover has been really bad on the greens here. I mean, 0.7, but I think last year he lost a ton. I'm shocked to see him positive 0.7. Because last year he lost a ton on the greens. So, that's why I always talk about putting being a fickle statistic. Here this week and gone the next. Sepp Straka, good with proximity. Been on. Eckroat. Gosh dang it. Went all the way to the bottom when I didn't mean to. Where were we? Eckroat. Damon. Alex Smalley, 0 for 3. But good with the proximities. Huh. Okay. I just wanted to take a quick look at at those, considering what the comparison course file showed us. I'm going to end the show off showing you some of the research that led to what I posted. Let's start with the winner matrix. This is performance at Waialae leading up to a champion's win. Now, Grayson Murray broke a lot of trends last year. You see, Grayson Murray played it once in 2021 and missed the cut. Didn't play it a couple times and then comes and wins last year. But I want you to notice what the majority of these other winners have. Siwoo Kim, winner in 2023. He had a top 5 and a top 25 previously. Hideki started off rough in the beginning of his career. He's got a couple of top 20s, and one of them being a top 15 before he wins. Kevin Na didn't play for a couple of years, but historically had a top 10 and a top 20. So, majority of these champions, with the exception of Grayson Murray and Patton Kizzire, majority of these champions have had a prior top 20 at the Sony, at Waialae. Maybe even a top 15. I can't remember if I put top 15 or top 20. But they've generally just played Waialae well before in the past. At some point. Didn't have to be recent. Siwoo, it wasn't terribly recent. You know, his top 5 came 8 years prior. Kevin Na, his top 10 came 7 to 8 years prior. But they had at least some success at Waialae. Another key thing you might hear this week is players who have played at the Century. Well, the past 2 winners, Siwoo and Grayson Murray, neither of them played the Century before winning. Almost every other one before them, though, had. 2019 was... Who was 2019? Justin Thomas? No, Cam Smith. Okay. So Cam Smith didn't play the Century, won the Sony. Almost all of them had played the Century to varying degrees of success. Justin Thomas, way back in 2017, completed the Hawaiian Double, wins the Century, wins the Sony. Hideki in 2022, top 15 the Century, but that's when the Century had 34 players, so it wasn't, a big amount of success. Kevin Na was almost DFL the Century, and then wins the Sony. Most of these champions have had, at least got some of the rust off by playing the Century. It's not mandatory, as you can see here, but they more often than not they have played the Century. And the last thing I want to show you, at least in terms of what I had seen to post on research, again, Grayson Murray broke a lot of trends last year. Considering he had only played once in the fall, he missed the cut. But most of these champions had at least an amount of success in the fall. Kind of what I mentioned last week for the Century. Siwoo Kim had a top 10 in the fall. Hideki had a top 10 in the fall. Kevin Na, 2020 was a ridiculous year, so that's kind of an outlier in of itself. But even he had a top 15 at that November Masters. Cam Smith had a top 5 and a top 15. So most of these champions had at least one very good showing in the preceding fall. Procore or Safeway or Fortinet, Sanderson Farms, RSM, Shriners. Go back and take a look at your leaderboards from those tournaments this past fall. Those are going to be some of the guys that at least fit that trend, and especially if they played the Century, that'll be a really big indicator of at least who matches the patterns from these previous winners. There were 33 players that fit 2 of those 3 criteria. There were 11 players that fit all 3 criteria that I put out on social media. So if you want to see that list of players, I ask that you go give me a follow over at X. I do research every Monday, put that out over on social media. That's going to be it for the show this evening. Thanks to Darnell and Joanne for jumping in chat. It was good to see you both. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. I really can't express it enough that if you have success, please put it in chat, put it in the comments. I love being able to shout out members of the community who have success, even if I don't, much like what Phil had last week at the Century. So, love what I do. Wouldn't be able to do it without your all support. I really appreciate it. For all of the wagers you've made so far this week for the Sony, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Sony, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.